Okay.
All right. So I'm calling this series Ask the Expert series. Dilip is our first expert. I worked with Dilip over the last couple of years and have had great career coaching experience. So I thought this would be a good opportunity for the group to ask their career questions. And here is a quick background on what the experience that Dilip has. He has over 7,500 clients, has been in his fifth career since the 2001 downturn. He has made several breakthroughs with professionals across levels. He's based out of the Bay Area, very much local to Fremont, where I live. And also he has authored 5 books and published articles in Harvard Business Review, Chief Executive, and other publications. So a lot of experience under his belt, and we're glad to have him for the session today. Topics for today: career progression, career job changes, and leadership development. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them into the chat, and I'll try to surface it as we go along this discussion. So jumping right in. So Dilip, thanks for joining again. I have a few questions which I had collected through this group.
Sure, thanks. Yeah.
And I wanted to start going through that list, but at the same time, feel free to add anything that comes to your mind as the discussion evolves.
Right, and same to anybody has a question on their mind, just chime it into Saurabh, and he can moderate it.
Yep. So the very first question, Dilip, is under the career progression category. How does an MBA degree give you an edge in your career progression? Because all of us here are doing an iDegree program. iDegree is what UIUC has tagged or branded their business school and some of the other programs that they have around master's programs that they have. So most of the participants here, all of the participants here are actually remote participants in the program. And there's going to be a event that will happen in September where some of us will be getting together. So that's where there's some background on the cohort here.
Okay, no, that's good to know. So let me tell you about my own take on this whole MBA curriculum, MBA programs, and how does that tie into your roles in different companies in different functional areas. So what MBA programs are designed to do is first look at what it stands for. It's Masters in Business Administration. So it's actually a technical course. It's not a management course, it's a technical course. Just as software is, or program management is, or product management is, all of these are technical courses. MBA is a technical program. In other words, when you take an MBA program or curriculum for 2 to 4 years, depending on how long you sign up for, you will be taking specific courses that are tools within that function. For example, international marketing, analytics, data, how to manage contracts, right? Each of these are technical fields in their own specialty, right? And so what I don't want people to think that an MBA program equips them as a manager, because there are no management courses per se. It doesn't tell you what the functions of managing are, or how to manage a team, or how to hire people. All of those are management functions, which typically MBA does not cover, but it yet covers these specific courses, such as how to use analytics in marketing, how to do global trade, all of these kind of courses. So what I want people to, I'm not saying in anything negatively, but what I'm saying to everybody is, compared to how anybody else, such as somebody with a degree in computer science or somebody a degree in mechanical engineering, comes into the workforce versus somebody who also has an MBA is better prepared to understand how all of the different functional areas within a business work together to create a customer experience. That's why it's a master's of business administration. It's not master's in management, right? And so what I think helps an MBA better than anybody else who goes in with their own degree of specific.
Hey, Mon.
Hello?
I'm just calling you to remind you. You asked me to give you a reminder.
Hey, Chris, can you go on mute?
Okay, cool.
Did he want something?
Well, no problem.
No, I think he might be talking. Let me try to mute him.
Okay. All right. So the point I want to make is over all of the people who come from degreed disciplines, such as mechanical engineering, law, or accounting, or whatever, these are all, specific degrees. Somebody who also has an MBA has a tremendous advantage because they understand how a business has these different elements to it, all of which they have learned, not all of them, but many of them through their MBA curriculum. And consequently, they understand of how the system works in a business. In other words, when a customer says, I want to sign a contract, it doesn't only affect the contracting function, it affects the functional area that's going to deliver the goods. It's going to affect the customer support group. It's going to affect marketing. It's going to affect accounting. So people with MBA degrees have this advantage that other people who have come from just one track kind of a functional area do not have, and that gives them an edge. And then if they layer that with understanding how management works, what are the functions of management? Leading, planning, organizing, and controlling. These are 4 functions for setting up controls. Then they are likely to be better suited for an executive role, much faster than somebody who has kind of grown linearly in their own functional area. So that's how I see MBA giving an edge. And I want people to understand that, and most people don't, that it is a technical degree. It's not a management degree.
Yeah, well said, Dilip. I think a lot of us here have specialization in analytics,
You're right.
global marketing, but the cross-functional aspect that the B School degree provides is definitely a very good skill, especially for engineers who don't have exposure to accounting or finance or some of those other aspects of the business.
Right.
So definitely gives a good holistic perspective as we execute on projects within our organizations. So building on that, Dilip, what are some of the discontinuities in a career evolution that most of us are not aware of? Would you like to elaborate on that?
Yeah, I mean, when you talk of discontinuities, I would like to explain that by saying that the future in that particular step is different from the past, right? That's what I mean by discontinuity. And if you look at the entire spectrum of your career, starting from NCG, new college graduate, 21, 22-year-olds, all the way up to CEOs, if you take that whole gamut of different roles in the evolution of a career, I have codified 4 discontinuities that happen that people are not even aware of. So the first discontinuity occurs when you complete your school or get your degree and take your first job. That's a discontinuity because the way you study for exams and the way you work together and the way things happen in an academic environment are very different from how they happen in a work environment. And most people don't realize that, especially NCGs, new college graduates. And consequently, teamwork, for example, is not something that's promoted in schools. You do your own work, you get your own grades, you compete with others and you try to do the best you can and so forth. And that's somewhat what I call an isolation role where in the companies that you join, you have to work with team, you have to manage people's expectations, you have to work with a whole bunch of variables that are not present in an academic environment. That doesn't mean the academic environment is not rigorous. That's not what I'm saying. It's a different environment. And those skills are not taught in colleges. That's why if you look at the fallout of new college graduates that drop out of a first job that they take, it's like more than 50%. In more than half of the people, NCGs who take their first job are so disillusioned by what they see compared to what they were prepared for, that they say, I want to take another job, I want to go to nonprofit, that's a very large percentage of fallout, right? So that's the first discontinuity. The second discontinuity occurs when, as an individual contributor, after let's say 4, 5, 6 years, you've done a great job and they promote you to a manager role. That's the second discontinuity. And what people don't realize in that transition is that a manager's role is very different from an IC role. A manager's role is to manage resources and do technical work, whatever the technical area you are. An IC's role, an IC's responsibility, individual contributor's responsibility, is just to do the coding or the programming or the system design or contract writing or code writing or whatever. There are special areas. And so a lot of the times people don't make that transition well from individual contributor to manager. And that's why they become somewhat dysfunctional, because they keep going back to what they came from. They came from computer programming or coding or system design. And even as a manager, they keep going back to that specialty without regard to what their responsibilities are as a manager, which is managing teams and getting resources done and delivering projects, which also requires their technical specialty. But they keep gravitating to something they know, which is what their technical specialty is. And they rationalize it by saying to themselves, I got promoted because I was a great circuit designer, so I'm going to keep designing circuits. No, you have to keep doing management work in that role. So that's the second discontinuity.
So
and that's why a lot of managers fail in their role. Yeah.
Yeah, just to follow up there, I think like one of the things that I see here in the chat is what would help for somebody who's in an individual contributor, let's say in an engineering role and has got promoted to a managerial role, what would help for them to avoid going back to where they come from or their roots, which is individual contribution in a technical role? Like how
right. Yeah, that's a good question. So what I think the right approach is, if somebody is a good individual contributor and if they want to go into management, like manager, director, and so forth, they need to first show that they have a flavor or inclination and interest in management. And the way they can show that is they will lead a team, even though they don't have a designation of a lead or a manager. They will come together and brainstorm ideas and present to their boss, who is a manager, and say that, look, I thought of this problem and I collected 4 or 5 of my team members and I came up with this idea. I think let's implement it because it'll allow us to make our go to market faster. These are the kinds of markers that a manager should look for in their team before they take an individual contributor for their promotional role. Just because somebody has done great as an individual contributor does not automatically qualify for them to become manager. That's the exact reason why there are so many dysfunctional managers, because they never let go of where they came from, and they keep going back to what they are good at versus that should be doing as a manager. Resource management, doing the 4 functions of managing, leading, planning, organizing, and setting up controls. That's the functions of managing. And if they don't do that, then the team under them will be dysfunctional as well. So And that's exactly the reason in the business I am in, and I find roughly 80% of the managers are dysfunctional or incompetent or disengaged because they haven't gone through the evolution as a manager because they never let go of their individual contributor mastery if they had that. And that's a very important transition. So that's transition number 2. Discontinuity number 3 is when you become a functional head, like a vice president or a senior director of a functional area, and you're going into the next position, which could be SVP or sometimes a vice president. That's when you start understanding how the business works. In the director and manager roles, you master how the function works, such as mechanical engineering, such as criminal law, or such as writing ad copies. These are functional areas, right? And so in those functional areas, you are delivering value in that functional role. But when you go into VP or SVP, you have to deliver the value at the business role. And that's another transition people don't make very well. And the fourth and final transition is when you go from EVP or SVP to a CEO role. That's where you are managing the industry, which is the markets, the competition, the global forces, all of that stuff. So I want people to understand that these 4 discontinuities are very real. And unless you understand what makes before and after this transition workable, they will not be successful in their next role.
Makes sense. Yeah. I think letting go is an important skill, I think, which all of us need to learn.
Not just letting go, but also, that's a good point, but also looking ahead, what different things I need to master to conquer my next role, right? I mean, letting go is easy, but then what do? You have to grab onto something new, right? And if you don't understand the difference between letting what go and grab on what new, you will not be effective.
Yeah, makes sense. So the next one, Dilip, was around what is the most common factor in career setbacks? Because as we speak, there is so many layoffs happening around us here in the industry as of today. So I just wanted your perspectives on what those are and how can you sort of overcome those setbacks.
Okay, I think there are many factors why setbacks occur, but the most common, let's say that there is no industry-wide layoffs, or there is no economic downturn, or let's say everything is kind of humming along well, and people get jobs and people are able to move and have mobility and those kinds of things. So that's what I call a quiescent environment, right? In a quiescent environment, the most single factor that I find in my role as an executive coach is knowing how to manage relationships. Relationships between you and your team, among your peers, managing up, and managing the whole ecosystem. Those relationships is what drives your success, not how good you are at what you do. That is a prerequisite. But if you cannot manage relationships, and if you don't understand what drives these relationships to flourish, you will always be suffering some setback in your career. And that, to me, that's the most single factor that I see why people get either laid off, lose their jobs, tank their careers, or get disappointed in their station in life with no growth. That's the single most important factor I find across all of these variables, right? The second most is your technical competence. When I say technical competence, how well are you able to deliver your functional value in the role that you are in? And if you cannot do that well, then you're vulnerable. And you see people who cannot do their job well, they're just about average or below average. and they wonder why they're not growing or why they're on the list of layoffs. So the most important factor, once again, is relationships. The second most important is being expert in the functional area that you are in, all the way up to CEOs. CEO is also a function, right? And then there are myriad factors, right? Depending on your level of responsibility, it could be how well you exceed your KPIs and how well you manage change well. How do you transform things? How do you look ahead? How you provide leadership? All of those things are somewhat ancillary. But if you have this basic requirement, I call it table stakes, where you're good at what you do technically, whatever the technical area is. It could be legal briefs to ad copy to software code or whatever, to understanding how that translates into business, which is why MBA comes in a very useful in that progression. And those are the kinds of things that I think give people the stability they need without having to worry about when is my next layoff coming.
Makes sense. Yeah. That and I'm talking about the other end of the spectrum now. Like, let's say you are doing everything, you have the relationships, you have the technical skills, you are meeting your goals and objectives. What is the right way for individuals to discuss promotions with their leadership? Because sometimes the leadership might overlook the managerial skills that you're developing. They might tag you as a technical person.
Right.
How do you sort of break that barrier and also start discussing the progression opportunities within the organization?
I think that's a very good point, and most people are not good at it. So here's the thing that most people believe in, right? They believe in they should get what they deserve. That's their mantra, right? I've done good work. I've delivered all the stuff. I have, met my goals this year, so I deserve a promotion. I should get what I deserve. You don't get what you deserve. You get what you negotiate. And the way to set yourself up for a promotion is before the year begins, you need to have a discussion with your boss and say that, look, these are the things that we have agreed that I'm going to do this year. In addition, I have identified these three things that I want to improve the infrastructure so that we can be more efficient in debugging process. I'm going to make the hiring process more streamlined because we take too long to hire a new candidate. And I want to streamline that process. And the third thing I'm doing is whenever we lose a team member, I want to really find out why they are leaving rather than just a superficial exit interview. Those are the three things I'm going to take on myself. And at the end of the year, I'm going to give you my findings and hope that between you and me, my boss and me, we can make changes to improve on all these three fronts. So I'm not only going to meet the KPIs that you set up for me, but I'm also going to do some of these things on my own. And the boss says, gosh, that's amazing, you can do that. And once they agree to that, then you say to your boss that, look, if I'm able to deliver on these things, plus what I have initiated, then I would like to negotiate my next promotion with you. And tell me what else I need to do now so that at the end of the year, I will secure that promotion. Nobody that I know has this kind of discussion. They go at the end of the year for APR, annual performance review. The boss says, Saurabh, you've done very well this year. Here is your 2.5% raise, and I hope you can do the same next year. And you salute the boss and you go home and celebrate, right? That's the typical scenario. But if you do what I told you, it actually works. And I've done this with almost all my clients. And not only that, I have done this with clients who got their new job. And when they developed the 100-day plan in the new job, one of the things that they present to their boss is, look, I'm going to do this and this and this. And at the end of the year, I want this out of this. And can you make sure that we agree to that? Depends, cannot be promotion in the first year, but it could be more money that you didn't get as a sign-on bonus, or maybe you got less stock than they promised, or that you got only one day to work, from home than 3 days that they promised. All these things are concessions that you need to negotiate up front. So I think to answer your question in a somewhat long-winded way is, once again, I'll repeat what I said. You don't get what you deserve, you get what you negotiate. And I'll tell you a story that Warren Buffett tells. It was 1930s. Warren Buffett was about 12 years old, and his uncle had a hardware store in upstate New York. And one winter, it really snowed very heavily, and his whole front of the store was covered with snow. And there were people lining up for flashlights and bulbs and you name it, right? Because they ran out because of the storm. And he couldn't even open the door. So Warren Buffett went with his friend Jimmy to his uncle's place, 12 years old. And his uncle said, you and Jimmy, if you can shovel the snow out, I'll each give you something because this is a busy day for me. And they worked very hard for 3 hours shoveling snow, small kids, 12-year-olds. And his uncle did roaring business that day because people were lined up. And at the end of the day, he gave them each a $1.25, right? And that's what Warren said. This was my first lesson. If I told my uncle before I shoveled the snow that both Jimmy and I deserve $5 if we shovel the snow and open the doors, he would have agreed to it. But once the doors were open, it was mean nothing to him. And he gave them each a $0.25. And that applies to our jobs. Because the things that happen is boss goes away, new boss comes in. And he says, well, I didn't know you had a disagreement. He didn't tell me that. Or they say, well, I haven't seen your progress, so I can't promote you. I have somebody else in mind. You see how this happens? I'm sure it has happened to you and to many other people.
Yeah.
So the best strategy is to do it preemptively and deliver with exceeded expectations.
Yeah.
That's a surefire way to protect. I'm not saying you get the promotion, but to protect your promotion.
Makes sense. Yeah, and some related questions that I'm seeing here in the chat. One is around, like, sometimes, let's say I'm a director, my manager is a senior director. Would he promote you to a senior director until he gets to a VP or, let's say, an executive director? The other aspect is also, like, what if you have already had those negotiations, you went in with a good plan beginning of the year, exceeded expectations on all fronts and did a few extra things, and still you get to hear the same old message that you are not yet ready for the next level. Is it time to move on at that point?
No, it's not. It's part of it is your fault because you did not develop what I call the meeting of the minds the year prior. In other words, you go into the year with a plan and a promise that says, I'm going to do these 4 things you asked, plus these are 3 of my own things I initiated. And I said, deliver on all of these things. I expect you to give me the promotion next year. And if the boss wants to look good, he or she is going to say, yes, that qualifies for a promotion. And then you send them an email that, Sally, I met with you. I'm glad you agree with my plan. And I plan to fully intend to deliver what I promised you. And I'm expecting to come through with the promotion that you promised me. That's the email you send Sally. Sally is not going to send you an email that I'll promote you. And Sally is not going to contest that email because she just told you that she would. So at the end of the year, Sally is gone, a new boss comes in, or Sally is still there, show her the email and demand your promotion. That's a much more compelling way for them not to honor what they committed to.
Yeah.
You have to be very aggressive. You just can't passively say, I did my job, now promote me. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, good tips, Dilip. Thank you. So the next section, Dilip, is around career job changes. And I think the first one that I can think of on that front is, like, what career patterns have you seen that are a wake-up call for one to make a change, be it within the organization, be it across one company to another, or maybe like a career change altogether, one industry to another?
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I think the most significant factor that is determinant of your welfare, if you want to call it that, in a career, is how much momentum you have in your role. And by momentum, it means you are getting a lot of juicy assignments. You're getting invited to the right meetings. You are in the middle of a lot of different things that are important to your boss. You are getting visibility to 3 levels up. So let's say that you are a senior manager, the SVP knows your name, right? All of these are signs that you are on a growth path and you are a star player. So let me give you the contrary to that. You are not being even invited to normal departmental meetings. You are just doing the same job day in and day out. And your boss says, there's nothing new for you, so just keep doing what you're doing. And something new will come up and I'll give it to you. And when something new comes up, he gives it to his pet guy, pet team member, right? These are the signs that you're tanked in your role and you cannot turn that around. When you reach that state, it's too late. So the other possibility is that your boss just has created a toxic environment, that he or she doesn't listen to your ideas. She has her own agenda. Constantly, she frustrates your efforts to kind of make any changes in a positive way. That's another sign that you don't belong in that group anymore. And that happens. That's why what I said 15 minutes earlier, the single most determinant factor in a career success is relationships. So if you don't have those good relationships with your boss, these things can happen, and they happen over time. So you don't see that happening because every day it's a little. But once you start seeing that trend, you need to preemptively say, I need to get out, right? Either inside the company, if it's big enough to take you somewhere else, or develop your campaign and go out and, reinitiate your network and start marketing yourself. But don't just wait for a layoff, because then it's too late. And that's one of the things that I'm sure you have it in your questionnaire, how to predict when layoff occurs. Well, 2 factors. One is economic factor, which is externally visible. But internally, what is visible is what is happening to you. If you are doing well, and if you are visible, and if you are in the middle of a lot of things, even though things go south for the company, they will try to protect it, because you are of value to them when the company is facing hardship. But if you're not in good books with them, you will be the first to go.
Yeah.
You how that works?
Yeah, no, really helpful. I think like it's a great lesson, especially in this time, right? How do you sort of make sure you have the right relationships? Can you elaborate on how all of us can maintain those relationships? It looks like the relationship with the manager definitely is important in this case, but with your stakeholders or with your clients within the organization is equally or even more important, right? So can you elaborate on building relationships as an aspect as well?
So let me go back to what you said about 10 minutes ago, right? You are a director, your boss is a senior director, and he's not going to promote you to a senior director because just for whatever reason, right? I mean, there are 2 senior directors. So let's take that case for a discussion. So what you want to do is not to say to your boss that, look, boss, I've done so well. I want the next promotion, and I don't know how you can give it. That's a very wrong approach to how you want to proceed. What you want to do to say to your boss is, you have been a senior director for the last 4.5 years. I want to see you getting promoted to the VP. Let me know what I can do to help you there. And he will then, or she will say that, look, one of the things that my VP or SVP is demanding from me for the last 2 years is completely develop a new infrastructure for development. And I just don't have the resources or the budget or the new idea on how to do it. But if you could help me shore through that, or if you help me navigate through that, I can probably make that case to my SVP, and that might allow me to get promoted, then I can promote you. So you see, you preempted basically his priority or yours, and then made it easy for him or her to say that if you get what you want, I know you'll give me what I want.
Makes sense.
But that requires an effort, that requires guts to say, here are the things I need to be doing, and to have that openness with the boss to be able to share what their aspirations are. Nobody talks to I mean, I wouldn't say nobody, but it takes a special skill and discipline to talk to your boss and say, how can I help you move up so that I can move up as well?
Yeah.
People just think of their own growth, right?
Would this be applicable to your stakeholders as well? Like, could you ask a similar question of your, let's say, marketing counterpart who you're supporting with analytics, or with your sales counterpart who you?
Absolutely, absolutely. And you could do that to them in a way that is helpful. For example, if the marketing team came through for your GTM initiative for your product, let's say you're a product manager, right? And your marketing came through with a terrific ad campaign, and they had some Marcom initiatives that really on social media were a big hit. And so you look like a hero because of what they did, right? So I would send a special message to the boss of this marketing guy, maybe the CMO and the CEO, copy to the CEO and say that, look, I'm getting a lot of kudos for my success for this product that's beat the GTM timelines and so forth. But the real credit goes to the marketing team, because here are 3 things they did that completely changed the trajectory for getting to go by executing the GTM. And here are the specific things they did. And I want to make sure that they're acknowledged for that success and not just me because I'm the product manager. Now that changes their view of how they see you. And that's what I mean by managing those relationships. Now you set up that guy for his promotion or her promotion. You see how that works?
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah. So the next question, Dilip, that I would have would be, so talking about the job market today and talking about the trends that you are observing in the market, some of the examples being like consulting skills are becoming more and more important, especially for senior roles. Or if you are a technical individual and if you want to move into a leadership role, how do you best market your skills, be it within your company or maybe even switching roles across companies? Would love to hear your thoughts on that front.
Right. So I want to just correct your statement here. If you are in a technical field and you want to move into a leadership role, that statement is not accurate in the way you phrased it. Anybody, even though they may be just an intern, is a leader. A leader is somebody who can come up with thought leadership that people can follow. So an intern can influence a CEO, or a janitor can influence a SVP by virtue of how they present their idea. So leadership has to do with creating thought leadership that people follow. That's what a leader is, and that's a follower is. Now, the correct way to phrase that would be, how does a person with a technical focus translate their skill into a managerial role, which is a different question. Everybody is a leader, but every leader is not a manager. A manager is one who has responsibility of resources to deliver using those resources. That's a manager's role. A leader may or may not be a manager, right? I mean, is that distinction clear?
Yeah,
Okay.
Makes sense. Yeah.
So anybody who thinks that they're not a leader is shortchanging themselves by saying, oh, I'm just an IC. No, an IC can be a leader if they have new ideas that people are following. So the way to get to the manager role is to start behaving like a manager, become a lead, take some responsibility and say that I've gathered a team of this 4, I've given them an idea, they're seeding the idea, and pretty soon we're going to create a new algorithm by which we can do this generative AI much faster. Here is how I'm going to do it, right? So if you do this enough times, your higher ups will see that you have done above and beyond, and you have led and managed without authority, basically. And that qualifies for them to look at you differently than if you just did what they told you, right? So I think a lot of that depends on how you preemptively do things, if that's the direction you want to go in a managerial role, or maybe you want to stay in an IC role and you can still be a leader as an IC. There are principal engineers, there are architects, there are fellows, there are senior fellows, these are all IC roles, and yet they can lead very large teams.
Makes sense. Yeah. The other area as it relates to job changes or career changes would be like are there resources to identify upcoming trends or upcoming skills, or how do you maybe identify skills within what you are doing which are transferable across jobs or industries?
Right. I think that's a good point. So here's the thing that I think works typically. First of all, whatever area of expertise that you are anchored in, let's just say circuit design, or let's say IC layout, or UX, or any one of those skills, right? If you are really good at what you do, you become an SME in that function, subject matter expertise. You become the go-to person. Anytime there is really a tough problem in that specific area, people just consult you because you have the answers. You are the best in that specific field, the SME syndrome, or the expertise in that space. So what you want to do is, so you want to stay with that expertise, but at the same time, you want to look at how that expertise is evolving with changing factors like economy, human needs, design thinking, sustainability, all of those kinds of things that start happening, right? And generally what happens is these trends have a half-life of 5 to 10 years. And when I say half-life of 5 to 10 years, means, hello?
No, continue.
Okay. So half-life of 5 to 10 years. By that, I mean that if you look at how VCs or investors starts funding early development, let's take big data, right? 10 years ago, people just vaguely talked about big data. This is 2010, 2012 now, roughly, timeframe, right? And if you looked at the VC investments in big data, different types of, architectures and different types of big data and so forth, those investments started becoming more and more visible. And by the time those investments panned out into actual operational products, it took until 2015 or so before big data became mainstream and different flavors of it became, MapReduce, all those things that happened at that time. And so the way to keep visible the upcoming trends is you look at where the VCs are investing over the last 5 to 10 years or the next 5 to 10 years. And if you see the growth in those investments, it's a pretty good bet that that's the technology that's going to emerge as a winner technology. Same thing happened with cloud. Same thing happened with, AI, for example, right? And now AI is really a big deal. And so same thing happened with EV, electrical vehicles. And so what you want to keep your eyes on is where these investments from big verticals are happening and what technologies are critical for their success. And you start taking courses, doing some work in your garage and developing some things, then you are on the ground floor of that next wave. And that's the way to do it. If you do it when the jobs are posted, it's too late. Because then you're competing with people who already done it for 3 years.
Yeah. So getting ahead of the curve essentially by doing proof of concepts, or what you call just keeping up with the trend and making sure that you're
and seeing where the major technology investments are occurring, because what I told you, half-life is 5 to 10 years. Right? It took roughly 10 years for big data to really become mainstream. Now everybody's talking big data. Same thing with these other things I told you about.
Yeah.
And this is not something that happens. You have to be vigilant and invest some time in doing, and very few people do that well.
Got it. Yeah, no, great response, Dilip. I think the other part, Dilip, that a lot of people here are asking about is, you mentioned about leadership, and then there is also what we call as executive presence.
Yeah.
So if you think about, let's say, a SVP of a function, or if maybe even higher, like if you are in a C-suite for a company, what are some of the traits that you need to start demonstrating, or at least start developing from a skill development perspective, which can help you sort of get put on that trajectory to a SVP or maybe a C-suite eventually?
Right. So I think the table stakes are the ante, which is what I call threshold, that's the minimum, is be the best in your area of expertise. That's how you get to whatever it is that you attain, like a VP role or senior director role or SVP role or whatever. You have to be really good at that particular area that you claim is yours. That's a given. And if you do just that, you basically stay where you are. But to develop the executive presence, what you need to focus on is one of the things, and of the many things I said, you need to know how to build relationships with people. You need to have good listening skills, which is basically part of the emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence has 5 components, right? Is self-awareness of self, self-control, motivation, empathy, and communication. These are 5 vectors of emotional intelligence. And each one of those has its own kind of a skill that you need to have: how to listen well, how to communicate well, how to have self-control, how to be self-aware. All of those things are very important in cultivating your executive presence. Executive presence has nothing to do with how you look or how tall you are or how imposing you are or whatever. It has to do with how you are able to influence people by how you communicate, how you make your point, and how you are able to change their minds. That's what executive presence is. And it doesn't matter anything else about, you could have accent, you could be short, you could be female, you could be whatever, and you could be 20 years old. You can have executive presence. And so it's something that's cultivated, it's developed, it's not God-given. So it requires work, and it requires work on all these 5 elements that I just told you about, and your ability to influence. That's what executive presence is.
Makes sense. So it looks like relationship building seems to be out there, be it getting promoted, be it growing into an executive role.
All of it.
So that seems to be like a top, if I have to develop one top skill, relationship building.
Relationship building and communication, right? I mean, the thing that I find most frustrating is how many people, my clients, I literally work with thousands of them now, cannot communicate well in writing what they have in their mind. And when I look at them, I spend, I would say, 50 or 60% of my time rewriting what they wrote, because what they wrote just doesn't convey what they wanted to convey. And they say, well, I meant to convey that, but what you said is exactly what I wanted to say. Then I said, why don't you say that? And they say, well, I didn't know how to say that. Well, I said, is there any word you don't understand what I wrote? And I said, no, I understand every word you wrote. Then why? It requires a disciplined approach to writing and thinking and communicating articulately, right? And it's a skill that is probably the most valuable skill you will have.
Any specific trends that you're observing? I know we are kind of closing to the end of the hour, but I think this would be a good question maybe to get your thoughts on. Like any areas that you see are emerging or like where?
Well, it's obviously, Chat GPT and generative AI are two that are really taken by the storm right now.
Mhm.
But, I mean, there are a lot of sub-trends, like electrical vehicles is one, because environment has become a big issue now. So that will continue to stay on the forefront. And look at, I don't know if you read the article that came out yesterday in Fortune magazine, how Tesla recharging design has become universal now. I don't know if you read that article, and everybody bought it. And now Tesla has become the brand for all recharging stations. Everybody is conforming to that. And they took a lot of risk, and now they are really become the hero. So there are mega trends like, Chat GPT, generative AI, and all those things. But within these big trends like electric vehicles and social media and all of those things that are, fintech is another area that's happening. Although crypto, in my mind, is kind of on the decline right now, fintech will continue to dominate because that's where the friction is for most people. Either the fees you pay, or the latency of it, or the errors that occur in transactions, or fraud. All of those things will always keep fintech on the forefront of many developments, right? So anybody who can do data security is another area that's big right now. And if you look at how Skyflow really got to be a major player very quickly, you can read the Skyflow story about data security. So there is not one thing, but there are many things that are causing these kinds of developments to kind of grow somewhat exponentially and very quickly.
Makes sense. Yeah. And anything on the life sciences healthcare side that you comes to mind, Dilip?
I think, of course, there is a tremendous amount of work that's happening in life sciences. Cancer, every day there is some kind of a breakthrough in cancer. And look at all of these forensic results that are happening as a result of DNA analysis and all of that. So I think that field will always have tremendous opportunity to constantly change. Because look at how much you spend on healthcare and pharmaceuticals and all of that. So any treatment modalities that come out of that are cost effective, and also using generative AI to develop prognosis, right? In fact, one of my clients in Michigan is doing that. He has collected all the data of, let's say, 10,000 surgeries on heart, right? And he has said, out of 10,000, 7,000 had these patterns. And when those patterns exist, the patient dies. So if the patient comes in with that kind of symptomatology, right, you know that the probability of saving that patient is very low. So you need different approaches to how to treat that patient rather than spend $100,000 doing open heart surgery. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, a very relevant example. In fact, the company that I work for right now, we are trying to bring the second in class for hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. So very relevant example, Dilip. Thank you.
Yeah, and this actually happened with, it's happening in this client of mine in Michigan. So there is, any field that you take has these frontiers that are being constantly advancing. So it's a question of where is your interest, where is your focus, and where is your passion, and how do you apply all of that to kind of make yourself at the center of these things.
Yeah, this was great conversation, Dilip. Thank you again for contributing 1 hour on a Friday afternoon.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So how many people showed up finally?
It was at around 30 people. So you were very much on
I
target.
told you 30 will show up, right? I've done enough of these, so I know how many sign up and how many show up.
Yeah. I have a quick call to action for
I
this group here.
to ask questions.